My grandmother didn't understand why men in suits kept showing up at her door. She didn't understand why they were talking about foreclosure, about loans, about money she supposedly owed. She was 83 years old, living in the house she'd owned for 47 years, and suddenly strangers were telling her she was going to lose it. When I found out what was happening, I discovered something worse than I could have imagined. My Aunt Patricia had taken out a home equity loan in my grandmother's name, $200,000, and she'd never made a single payment. The house my grandmother had spent a lifetime paying for, the home where she'd raised 5 children, where she'd buried my grandfather, where every family gathering had taken place for decades, was about to be seized by the bank. All because her own daughter had forged her signature and stolen her home's equity. My name is Ryan, and this is the story of how family betrayal nearly destroyed the woman who'd given everything to her children, and how one notarized document from 15 years ago saved her from losing everything. It started with a phone call on a Saturday morning. My mother's voice was shaking. "Ryan, something's wrong with Grandma. She's confused, scared. Can you go check on her?" I drove to Grandma's house immediately. It was a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. She'd lived there since 1977, paid off the mortgage in 1995. It was hers, free and clear, or so we all thought. When I arrived, Grandma was sitting at her kitchen table surrounded by papers, official-looking documents with red stamps and bold letters. Final notice, foreclosure proceedings, debt collection. "Ryan," she said, her hands trembling, "I don't understand. These people say I owe money, but I paid off my house years ago. Your grandfather and we worked so hard. We paid every month. It's ours." I picked up one of the notices. It was from a mortgage company, claiming my grandmother had defaulted on a home equity loan taken out 3 years earlier for $200,000. "Grandma, did you take out a loan?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "No, never. Why would I? The house is paid for." I called the number on the notice, spoke to a representative. They confirmed that a home equity loan had been opened in my grandmother's name in September 3 years ago. The funds had been disbursed, and not a single payment had been made since. "There must be a mistake," I said. "My grandmother is 83 years old. She didn't take out this loan." "Sir, we have signed documentation. The loan was approved and funded. If payments aren't made immediately, we'll proceed with foreclosure. I need copies of everything, the application, the signatures, all of it." They agreed to send the documents. I hung up and looked at my grandmother. She was crying softly. "I can't lose my house, Ryan. This is all I have." "You're not going to lose it," I said, though I had no idea if that was true. "I'm going to figure this out." The documents arrived 3 days later. I spread them out on my dining room table and went through every page. The loan application had my grandmother's name, her social security number, her address. But something was off. The signature didn't look right. I'd seen my grandmother's signature hundreds of times. She had distinctive handwriting. Small, careful letters. This signature was larger, sloppier, different, and then I saw the contact information. The phone number listed wasn't my grandmother's landline. It was a cell phone number I didn't recognize. I called it. A woman answered. "Hello? Who is this?" I asked. There was a pause. "Who are you trying to reach?" "This number is listed as the contact for a loan in my grandmother's name." The line went dead. I called back. Voicemail. I tried again and again. Finally, on the 5th attempt, someone answered. "Stop calling this number." I recognized the voice. It was my Aunt Patricia. My stomach dropped. "Patricia, why is your number on Grandma's loan application?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "The home equity loan for $200,000. Your number is listed as the contact." Silence. Then, "I was helping Mum with some paperwork. She asked me to handle it. She says she never took out a loan. She's old, Ryan. She forgets things." "Not things like this. Patricia, did you take out a loan in her name?" "I have to go." She hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. pieces falling into place. Patricia had always been the family problem, the one who couldn't hold a job, who was always asking for money, who'd borrowed from everyone and never paid them back. 2 years ago, she'd asked my mother for $10,000. Said it was for medical bills. My mother gave it to her. Patricia never mentioned it again. Last year, she'd asked my uncle for $5,000. Same story. Medical expenses. He gave it to her too. Now I understood. She hadn't been asking for money because she was broke. She'd been testing the waters, seeing who would say yes, seeing who she could manipulate, and when the family well ran dry, she'd moved on to her mother. I called my mum, told her everything. She was silent for a long time. "Patricia wouldn't do that," she finally said. "Mom, her phone number is on the loan documents. She answered when I called it." Maybe Mom really did ask for her help and forgot about a $200,000 loan. "Mom, this is fraud. Patricia forged Grandma's signature and stole her equity." My mother didn't want to believe it. None of us did. But the evidence was undeniable. I hired a lawyer specializing in elder fraud. Her name was Karen. She reviewed the documents and nodded grimly. "This is identity theft. Your aunt fraudulently obtained a loan using your grandmother's information. The signature is forged, the contact information is wrong, and your grandmother never received any of the money. Can we stop the foreclosure?" "We can try, but we need to move fast. The bank has already initiated proceedings. We need to file a police report and contest the loan immediately." We went to the police station that afternoon, filed a report for identity theft and fraud. The detective assigned to the case was skeptical at first. "Family disputes over money are common," he said. "Are you sure your grandmother didn't authorize this?" "She's 83 years old," I said. "She has no memory of signing anything, and she never received the money. Where did $200,000 go?" The detective agreed to investigate. Meanwhile, Karen filed an emergency motion to halt the foreclosure. She argued that the loan was fraudulent and that my grandmother was a victim of financial elder abuse. The bank fought back. They claimed they'd followed all proper procedures, that the loan had been approved through legitimate channels, that they couldn't be held responsible if someone had forged documents. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, I dug deeper into Patricia's finances. What I found was staggering. In the 3 years since the loan had been taken out, Patricia had gone on a spending spree. New car, luxury vacation to Europe, designer clothes, expensive jewelry. She'd even put a down payment on a condo, all of it funded by my grandmother's stolen equity. I gathered receipts, credit card statements, social media posts showing her extravagant lifestyle. Everything I could find, and I took it all to Karen. "This is motive," she said. "This shows she had the means and the opportunity. But we need to prove she's the one who forged the signature." "How do we do that?" "We need a handwriting expert, someone who can compare your grandmother's real signature to the one on the loan documents." We hired an expert, Dr. Michael Torres, a forensic document examiner with 30 years of experience. He analyzed the signatures, measured angles, compared pressure points, studied the flow of the ink. His conclusion was definitive. The signature on the loan documents was not written by the same person who wrote the known samples of your grandmother's signature. The differences are significant and numerous. In my professional opinion, this is a forgery. We had our evidence. The hearing arrived. My grandmother, my mother, and I sat on one side of the courtroom. Patricia sat on the other with her attorney. She wouldn't look at us. Karen presented our case, the forged signature, the expert testimony, the financial records showing Patricia's sudden wealth, the phone number on the loan application. My grandmother testified. She spoke quietly but clearly. "I never signed those papers. I never wanted a loan. My house was paid for. My daughter did this without my knowledge or permission." The judge asked Patricia to testify. She took the stand, looking confident. "I was helping my mother," she said. "She asked me to handle the loan application because she didn't understand the paperwork." "Did your mother tell you to use your phone number instead of hers?" the judge asked. Patricia hesitated. She said it would be easier. She doesn't always answer her phone. And where is the $200,000? I used it for expenses, for her care, for things she needed. Can you provide documentation of these expenses? Patricia's attorney requested time to gather records. The judge gave him 1 week. When we reconvened, Patricia's attorney presented a folder of receipts, medical bills, grocery receipts, utility payments. Karen went through them methodically. Your Honor, these receipts total less than $12,000 over 3 years. Where is the remaining $188,000? Patricia's attorney had no answer. The judge's expression hardened. Ms. Patterson, I find your testimony to be inconsistent with the evidence. The forensic expert has determined the signature was forged. The financial records show you spent significant sums on personal luxuries, and you cannot account for the vast majority of the loan proceeds. She ruled in our favor. The loan was declared fraudulent and void. The foreclosure was permanently stopped, and Patricia was ordered to repay every cent. But the judge didn't stop there. I'm referring this case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. What you've done is not just a family dispute. It's felony fraud, it's identity theft, it's financial elder abuse, and it will be treated as such. Patricia went pale. Her attorney tried to argue for leniency, but the judge wasn't interested. Your client preyed on her own elderly mother. She forged documents. She stole a life savings worth of equity. She showed no remorse. The court finds these actions reprehensible. Patricia was charged with multiple felonies: identity theft, forgery, grand theft, elder financial abuse. Her trial was set for 6 months later. In the meantime, my grandmother's house was safe, but the emotional damage was profound. She couldn't understand how her own daughter could do this to her. I gave her everything, Grandma said one afternoon as we sat in her kitchen. I raised her, I fed her, I put her through school. And this is how she repays me? Some people are broken, I said gently. It's not your fault. I must have done something wrong. To raise a child who could be so cruel. You didn't do anything wrong. Patricia made her own choices. But I could see the guilt eating at her, the sense that she'd somehow failed as a mother. It broke my heart. The trial was painful. Patricia's attorney tried to paint her as a victim, claimed she'd been under financial stress, that she'd made poor decisions but hadn't meant to hurt anyone. The prosecutor destroyed that narrative. He presented the evidence methodically: the forged signature, the expert testimony, the luxury purchases, the complete lack of remorse. And then he called my grandmother to testify. She walked slowly to the stand, leaning on her cane. The prosecutor asked her to describe the impact of Patricia's actions. Grandma spoke quietly. I almost lost my home, the home my husband and I built together, the place where I raised my children, where I've lived for 47 years, because my daughter stole from me, and I don't understand why. If she needed money, she could have asked. I would have helped her, but she didn't ask. She just took. And now I don't feel safe in my own home. I worry every day that someone else will try to take it from me. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found Patricia guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge showed no mercy. Ms. Patterson, you exploited your own mother's trust. You forged her signature. You stole her home equity. And you spent the money on luxury items while your mother faced foreclosure. The court sentences you to 5 years in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay full restitution to your mother in the amount of $200,000, plus interest, legal fees, and damages. Patricia was led away in handcuffs. She still didn't look at us. My mother cried, not tears of relief or justice, but tears of grief. She'd lost her sister. My grandmother sat silently staring at her hands. After the sentencing, we went back to Grandma's house. She made tea. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where this nightmare had begun. I'm glad it's over, she said quietly. But I'm not glad about what I learned, about my own daughter. You didn't deserve this. I said. No one does, but especially not you. She looked at me with tired eyes. Do you think she'll ever apologize? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to give her hope. But I couldn't lie. I don't know, Grandma. I don't think Patricia sees what she did as wrong. Then I feel sorry for her, because she's lost more than her freedom. She's lost her family, and she had. None of us speak to Patricia. Not my mother, not my uncles, not any of her cousins. She's completely cut off. When she gets out of prison, she'll have nothing, no family, no support, just the consequences of her choices. My grandmother lived for 2 more years after the trial. She passed away peacefully in her sleep at 85, and she died in her own home, the home she'd fought so hard to keep, the home Patricia had tried to steal. In her will, Grandma left the house to me and my siblings, specifically excluded Patricia. The will stated clearly, Patricia has already taken more than her share. She will receive nothing further from my estate. It was the last act of a woman who'd been deeply hurt, but refused to be destroyed. We sold Grandma's house after she died, split the proceeds between the family members she'd named in her will, used part of it to establish a scholarship fund in her and my grandfather's names. Patricia tried to contest the will, claimed she deserved a portion of the estate. The court rejected her claim immediately. She'd been convicted of stealing from my grandmother. She had no standing to demand more. The restitution she was ordered to pay, she's never paid a cent. She claims she's indigent, has no assets, can't work. The court has garnished her wages when she's had jobs, but she keeps getting fired or quitting, so the debt remains, growing with interest. She'll never pay it off. And honestly, I don't care about the money anymore. What I care about is that my grandmother's last years weren't spent on the street, that she died with dignity in her own home, surrounded by people who loved her. Patricia couldn't take that away. She tried, but she failed. If there's a lesson in this story, it's this. Pay attention to the people around your elderly relatives. Watch for signs of financial abuse, unexplained loans, sudden changes in financial behavior, relatives who push others away and isolate the elderly person. These are red flags, and if you see them, act immediately. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't assume family members have good intentions just because they're family. Some people see their elderly relatives as nothing more than assets to exploit, and they'll do it without hesitation, without remorse, without a second thought. My aunt was one of those people, and she almost succeeded. If I hadn't gotten involved when I did, my grandmother would have lost everything. But I did get involved, and we fought back, and we won. Not because we were lucky, but because we had evidence, because we acted quickly, because we refused to let Patricia get away with it. That's what it takes: vigilance, action, and the willingness to hold family members accountable, even when it's painful, especially when it's painful. Because sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we're supposed to trust. And when that trust is betrayed, we have to be strong enough to fight back. My grandmother was that strong. Even at 83, even when she was scared and confused, she stood up in court and told the truth. She refused to let her daughter's betrayal define her final years. And that's the legacy I'll carry forward. Not the house, not the money, but the strength, the dignity, the refusal to be destroyed by cruelty. That's what my grandmother taught me, and I'll spend the rest of my life honoring that lesson. Have you ever seen a family member exploit an elderly relative? Have you had to fight to protect someone from financial abuse? Tell us your story below, because these conversations matter. They warn others. They provide guidance for people facing similar situations, and they remind us that we're not alone in these fights. Together, we can protect the vulnerable. Together, we can hold predators accountable. Together, we can make sure that people like my grandmother don't lose everything to people like my Aunt Patricia. But there's something I haven't told you yet. Something that made Patricia's betrayal even more calculated. About 6 months before she took out the loan, there was a family gathering at my grandmother's house. It was Thanksgiving. Everyone was there. My mother and her 4 siblings, all the grandchildren, the whole family. During dinner, My grandmother mentioned she was thinking about downsizing. "This house is too big for me now," she said. "Maybe I should sell it and move into a senior community." Patricia reacted immediately. "Mom, you can't sell this house. It's our family home. Think of all the memories here." "That's exactly why I want to stay," Grandma said. "But it's expensive to maintain. The property taxes keep going up. The repairs cost more every year. I'm not sure I can afford it much longer." My Uncle David spoke up. "How much equity do you have in the house, Mom?" "About $300,000, maybe more. I had it appraised last year." I remember Patricia's eyes lighting up at that number. At the time, I thought she was just interested in family finances. Now I know she was calculating, planning, seeing an opportunity. The conversation moved on to other topics. But after dinner, I saw Patricia talking quietly with Grandma in the kitchen. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I saw Patricia showing Grandma something on her phone. Later, much later, I realized what it was. She was showing her information about reverse mortgages and home equity loans, planting the seed, making it seem normal. 3 months after that Thanksgiving, Patricia moved in with my grandmother. She said it was temporary, that she'd lost her apartment and needed a place to stay while she got back on her feet. My grandmother, being who she was, said yes immediately. "Family helps family," she told my mother when she expressed concern. "Patricia is going through a hard time. I have the space. Of course she can stay." Patricia lived there for 6 months. During that time, she had access to everything. My grandmother's mail, her financial documents, her personal information, and she used that time to prepare, to learn my grandmother's routines, to figure out where she kept important papers, to gather everything she'd need to commit fraud. I found this out later, during the investigation. The detective discovered that Patricia had made multiple inquiries to different lenders about home equity loans during those 6 months. She'd been shopping around, comparing terms, finding the one with the loosest verification requirements. And when she found the right lender, one that would accept a phone application with minimal documentation, she struck. She filled out the application using my grandmother's information, forged her signature, used her own phone number as the contact, and because she was living in the house, she could intercept any mail that came about the loan. My grandmother never even knew it had happened until the foreclosure notice arrived 3 years later. By then, Patricia had moved out, spent the money, and cut off contact with most of the family. She'd planned the whole thing, from the Thanksgiving conversation where she learned about the equity, to moving in to gain access, to choosing the right lender, to timing her exit. It was premeditated, calculated, cold, and it almost worked. The only reason we caught her was because my grandmother called my mother when she got confused about the foreclosure notices. If she'd been too embarrassed to ask for help, if she'd tried to handle it alone, she would have lost the house before any of us knew what was happening. That's how these predators operate. They isolate their victims. They create confusion. They make the person feel like it's their fault, like they're losing their mind, like they should be ashamed to ask for help. Patricia had been setting that up too. In the months before the foreclosure notices started arriving, she'd been calling my grandmother regularly, but not to check in, to plant doubts. "Mom, are you taking your medications? You seem confused lately." "Mom, did you forget we talked about this last week? Your memory isn't what it used to be." "Mom, maybe you should let me handle your finances. You're making mistakes." She was gaslighting her, preparing her to doubt her own memory so that when the loan appeared, my grandmother would think maybe she had signed something and just forgotten about it. It was diabolical, and it would have worked if I hadn't been paying attention, if I hadn't insisted on seeing the actual documents, if I hadn't recognized that the signature was wrong. The detective told me this was a common pattern in elder financial abuse cases. The abuser moves in or gets close, gains trust, learns the person's routines and information, then commits the fraud, and finally tries to make the victim doubt their own reality so they don't report it. "Your aunt is a textbook case," he said. "She knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't impulsive. It was planned from the beginning. That realization was devastating for my mother. She'd defended Patricia initially, made excuses for her, tried to believe there was some misunderstanding. But when confronted with the timeline, with the evidence of premeditation, she couldn't deny it anymore. "I raised her," my mother said one night, crying. "I taught her right from wrong. How did she become this?" I didn't have an answer. Sometimes people make choices that go against everything they were taught. Sometimes the desire for money, for an easier life, for instant gratification, overwhelms every moral lesson they ever learned. Patricia chose greed over family, chose theft over honesty, chose to hurt the woman who'd given her life rather than work for her own success. Those were her choices, not my mother's, not my grandmother's, hers alone. At Patricia's trial, the prosecution called a psychologist who specialized in financial crimes. She testified about the psychology of family financial abuse. "Perpetrators often justify their actions by telling themselves they're entitled to the money," she explained. "They think, 'I'm family, so this money should be mine anyway. I'm just taking what I deserve.' They don't see it as theft. They see it as claiming their inheritance early." "Did the defendant show signs of this mentality?" the prosecutor asked. "Absolutely. In her police interviews, she repeatedly stated that she'd helped her mother over the years, that she deserved to be compensated, that the house would eventually be hers anyway. She felt entitled. And the victims, how do they typically respond? With confusion and self-blame. They can't understand how their own child or relative could hurt them. They often don't want to prosecute because they still love the person. They hope for reconciliation. They feel guilty for causing trouble by reporting the crime. That described my grandmother perfectly. Even after everything, she'd asked me if we really needed to press charges. "She's still my daughter," she'd said. "I don't want her to go to prison. Grandma, she tried to take you home. If she's not held accountable, she'll do it to someone else." I know, I wish things were different. Me too. But wishes don't change reality. Patricia had committed serious crimes. She needed to face consequences, not just for my grandmother's sake, but for every other vulnerable person she might target in the future, because people like Patricia don't stop on their own. They're only stopped when they're caught and punished. The restitution hearing happened 6 months after Patricia went to prison. The court calculated the total amount she owed, the $200,000 she'd stolen, the legal fees we'd incurred fighting the foreclosure, the cost of the forensic document examiner, the stress-related medical bills my grandmother had accumulated. The total came to $247,000. The judge ordered Patricia to pay it all. She'd earned pennies per hour in prison work programs. And even after release, she'd be required to pay a percentage of any income toward the debt. At current rates, Karen explained to us, she'll be making payments for the rest of her life. She'll never fully repay what she took. It was small comfort, but it was something. My grandmother never saw a penny of that restitution. She died before Patricia had earned enough to make even the first payment. But the debt remains, following Patricia, haunting her, a permanent reminder of what she did. I've thought a lot about whether prison changed Patricia, whether she feels remorse now, whether she understands the magnitude of what she did. I don't think so. The few communications she sent from prison have been angry, blaming. She's the victim in her own mind. We're the ones who wronged her by prosecuting her. My grandmother was being dramatic about losing the house. The judge was biased, the jury was stupid. She's learned nothing, regrets nothing. And that, more than anything, confirms we made the right decision to prosecute. Some people can't be rehabilitated because they don't believe they did anything wrong. Patricia is one of those people. She'll be released in 3 years. I dread it. Not because I'm afraid of her, but because I know she'll try to contact my mother, try to guilt her into providing support. Try to worm her way back into the family. My mother is already dreading it too. "What do I do when she gets out?" she asked me recently. "Do I talk to her? Do I help her? She's still my sister." "That's your choice," I said. "But remember what she did, not just to Grandma, but the planning, the manipulation, the complete lack of remorse. I know, but family doesn't mean you have to let someone hurt you repeatedly. You can love someone from a distance. You can hope they change. But you don't have to give them another opportunity to prove they won't. My mother nodded, but I could see the conflict in her eyes, the pull between loyalty and self-preservation. It's a battle she'll have to fight when the time comes. For now, we've moved forward. My grandmother's house was sold, her estate was settled, the scholarship fund was established, and we've tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy. But the scars remain. The knowledge that someone we trusted, someone we loved, was capable of such calculated cruelty. It changes you, makes you more cautious, more suspicious, sometimes in ways you don't want to be. I find myself questioning people's motives more now, wondering if they're being genuine or if they want something. It's exhausting, but it's also necessary because predators rely on trust, on the assumption that family members have good intentions, on the reluctance of victims to believe someone they love could hurt them. My grandmother believed the best in people. It was one of her most beautiful qualities, and it was the vulnerability Patricia exploited. I won't make that mistake. I'll verify, I'll question, I'll protect, not because I'm cynical, but because I've seen what happens when you don't, and I won't let it happen again, to anyone I love, ever. If you're reading this and you recognize the warning signs in your own family, act now. Don't wait. Don't hope it will resolve itself. Don't assume you're overreacting. Get copies of important documents. Monitor financial accounts. Ask direct questions. And if you discover fraud, report it immediately. Don't let family loyalty stop you from doing what's right, because the person committing the fraud isn't showing loyalty. They're showing betrayal, and they deserve consequences, not protection. My grandmother's story ended better than it could have. She kept her home. She lived her final years in peace. She saw justice served. Many victims aren't so fortunate. Many lose everything and never recover. Don't let that be your family's story. Fight back, stand up, protect the vulnerable. Because if we don't, who will? Have you ever had to make the difficult decision to report a family member for fraud? Have you watched someone you love be exploited and felt powerless to stop it? Share your experience. Your voice matters. Your story could help someone else recognize the warning signs, could give them the courage to act, could save someone's home, their savings, their dignity. That's the legacy my grandmother left. Not just to our family, but to everyone who hears this story. The lesson that you can fight back, that you can win, that justice, though difficult and painful, is possible and worth pursuing.